Hello, world, and welcome back to another episode of Practicing Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. My name's Sarah, and I'm here with my friend Lizelle, and today we're talking about episode 23, which is called Romanticism. So, to get us started, as we always do, I'm going to pass it over to Lizelle to get us started with a quote.
Hello, world. I told you before we started recording that I'm going to read a poem from one of the romantic poets, but I changed my mind as we were speaking about the thing before. When we talked about the French Revolution, my favorite book popped up in my mind. Charles Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities, amazing book, and it's got such a well-known and profound beginning that I thought I'm just gonna start with that.
Oh, yeah.
It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief. It was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light. It was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope. It was the winter of despair. We had everything before us. We had nothing before us. We were all going direct to heaven. We were all going direct the other way. In short, the period was so far like the present period that, that some of its noisiest authorities insisted on its being received, for good or for evil, in the superlative degree of comparison only.
Are we there again?
And it's only the beginning of a profound book. I love this book.
Oh, you
Tale of
got a
Two
very
Cities.
old copy too. It's so nice.
I think I bought it for 5 Rand, which is like 50 euro cents, something like that.
Wow, that's definitely a good place to start us here because where we left everybody and ourselves for a very long time, this is actually a recording much later than we normally do. We had like a whole month gap. And last time Descartes left us with our like complete disconnection from reality. We're like isolated in these little bodies, completely disconnected from other bodies and history and culture. And so John says, isolated and bereft, and yet we face all these crises. And here we are again, as you were just reading. But mental health, ecological, socioeconomic, political, all these crises are so complex. And he says we need a fundamental transformation in our consciousness, in our cognition, in our character, and in our community.
Mm-hmm. That is a really beautiful way to sum up his summary of the previous.
You're right. We have the systematic set of psychotechnologies have been religion. So now we're going to move into maybe this like secular approach to this approach to the crises.
So he says the greatest response after the universe was killed was we became more and more secular, and then he immediately says well, maybe I should be more the word slips my mind, but I should add that the world has also become more religious in a fundamental sense then, when the pendulum swings, it's going to go to extremes. So yeah, that we can only talk in the superlative of things we go through indeed. So
Yeah. Yes. So basically, like, it wasn't so easy to just be like, well, religion doesn't work, so let's just throw out religion and then we can answer all the questions.
no,
Right.
no.
Because you can, yeah, there's that nostalgic fundamentalism of religion, but now we're going to go into some of the ways that secularization can also fall short of answering the call to those problems. I also want to mention Mercury retrograde. So if ever there are words not coming to you, we have a reason.
Oh, I saw a meme today that I thought like, oh, I should share this with you, but I'm not big on sharing memes. I just laugh and scroll on. That may your Mercury be Freddy and not retrograde.
May he.
But alas, we are deprived of Freddy at the moment.
It was the best of times. It was the most confusing of times. Okay. Okay. And then he says, obviously, for him, returning to a religion to provide the multi-level, multivariate, complex transformation that is needed to meet these crises is not available to us. And then he says, now how might the secular solution might also no longer seem viable?
Yeah, because the pseudo-religious ideologies caused a lot of blood to flow. Yes, but blood has been flowing since humanity picked up the first rock, quite honestly. But yes, no, I get that. Like we had quite an extreme previous century, so we don't want to repeat that.
So basically what he's saying here is like the warfare was kind of like you could see the correlation between that movement and then warfare, bloodshed. There's a movement towards now, I guess, serving like a king or something. Like what was the secular? I guess not for the secular. How did that lead to warfare?
Well, political ideologies.
Okay.
He in this episode, what the Romantics had an influence on. I'm just going to show you images because apparently my words all of a sudden left me. It was perfect before we started recording, but now it's gone. And yeah, that. But he also hints at the Second World War when he talks about Germany.
Yeah.
So, and we've talked about how occultic the Nazis were. So, you know, this obsession with the Führer is
Yeah.
like a pseudo-religious ideology. This obsession with the homeland, and we are the supreme race, and we need to like eliminate everybody who's not blonde with blue eyes and things
Right.
like that. So that's what he's talking about.
Okay,
And
because then the next thing he
that's
says,
not even mentioning what happened in China and in many other places in the world. The Armenians, I think, were like massacred. Is that the word? Like quite to also in millions, but we don't necessarily hear about them as
right.
often.
Yeah, totally. And still ongoing that we don't talk about.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So yeah, the very next line, there is no political solution, he says, to quote the police, which I didn't understand that quote, but yeah, no political solution and no religious alternative.
Yeah. I don't know the song either.
Yeah. So then we move into Kant.
Yeah, that's why you made him all decorated
Design,
because
yeah.
he's like this Titanic figure, he says, and it's like when you know a little bit about philosophy, you know Kant is huge, and he spends like not even an episode on Kant. So that was like what? It's like that is like I can imagine it caused him sleepless nights. That's like yeah, you're supposed to spend a little bit more time on Kant probably.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, but I think he gets it to the gist very well. Like I feel like for the first time I kind of get Kant and hence Jung.
Yeah, and he does say at some point in here, oh no, I mean we're going to move into it. Kant's solution he believes to be a Copernican revolution, just as important as Copernicus's finding. So there's paying homage to the Titanic, groundbreaking solution, I guess, of trying to deal with this fracturing in realness that Descartes has left us with.
Groundbreaking fractioning in realness. Interesting words.
Right. Well, he says fracturing. For some reason, groundbreaking came up to me. So
Yeah.
yeah, we're gonna get into more of why that might be. Okay, so the question: how is math so good at describing reality when it is nothing like spatiotemporal material reality? And how do we get math as real when I only have access to my own mind? So that's the disconnect. It was like, okay, we're isolated in this mind because of Descartes. It actually doesn't transpose onto the real world what is going on in here. And so now Kant's going to deal with how it is that reality is explained by math from our perspective.
Yeah,
Right.
because remember, we think when we rely on our senses, the sun comes up and the sun goes down. But that's not what works for the maths. The math says no, that it works better when the sun is in the center. And lo and behold, we have discovered that the sun is in fact in the center. So reality is better explained by math than by our sense experiences. That is the where that just a recap of what
where
he's
we
talking
were.
about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then Kant throws a wrench in that. His
Yeah.
solution, he believes these categories, these patterns of intelligibility, we find in the world, the mathematical properties aren't actually in the world, but we're using them as kind of a filter, or we've created this filter that sees math.
Yes. The math is in our mind and we project it on the world. And the words I'm using now clearly is saying more about the tradition that followed Kant than Kant himself, like projecting it on the world. That's like Freud and Jung right there. But yeah, it's in our minds that the sense-making apparatus is, and not necessarily out there in the well. The intelligibility. How does he say it? He's big on that.
He says these categories, and then in parentheses I have patterns of intelligibility.
Yes.
These categories, intersubjective and the outer mathematical, we find in the world. The mathematical properties aren't actually there.
The patterns of intelligibility. That's the words that it's like that's the sun in this little cosmos. It circles that. It's the patterns of intelligibility is not outside in the world, contrary to what the Platonists believed. Like the patterns of intelligibility is there in the forms. No, it's here inside of our minds.
We created them.
Yes.
They aren't features of the world. He mentions Occam's razor here again and says that the patterns of intelligibility are actually in your mind and not in the world. They are the way in which experience has to be organized in order to make sense to the world, in the world.
Of the world, probably.
Of the world. Okay. So let's read that again. They are the way in which experience has to be organized in order to make sense of the world to the mind.
Yes, that sounds right.
And then that analogy of taking out the glasses, the world's so blurry, it's so much, I can't take it, so I need this filter in order to be able to make sense of it.
Yeah. Which is, like I mentioned, it brings me back almost, at least for me, the bell that's ringing in my head is Donald Hoffman's The Case Against Reality, because he says exactly that. We can't process all the information that is coming in from the world reality. We have evolved to process a certain limited amount. So we don't really have access to reality. We only have access to what we need for our survival.
Which is what makes it interesting to get into groups and have everybody's filters come together.
No, see, that is not because the whole elephant blind man theory, that is not because we're all human beings. We all have basically the same filters.
Okay.
That's like, yes, we have cultures that differ, but not so fundamentally that a tree is still a tree, wherever, like, so that is more radical than the cultural differences.
Right.
That's like being a human is radically different from being an ant. That's the difference that he refers to. Ants have another way of processing the information from the
through their
from the world.
sensory organs, the antennae,
feeling,
and the chemicals they produce with one another.
Yeah.
So
we're screwed. It doesn't help that you mix
but it does actually help. But I mean, like, if John filters John is a filter frame for me. You're a filter frame for me. Like
Mm,
I get like it doesn't necessarily mean that it's like the source of the information. And same thing when I was in the scientific community, like I don't know those projects. I don't know
mhm,
actually like the fossil record isn't actually complete. So in that sense it's not
mm.
actually real. So just for like the purpose of trying to understand the world, I use other people's filters so that I don't have to filter all of that information in. It's like a, you know, cheat code.
That's
Filter
really
through other people.
um, yes, yes, that's beautiful, and that is what John often says, I think, about um, the what do you call it? Collective intelligence. Um, that's exactly it. We
Yeah.
we we know so little by ourselves. We make use of like the collective uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
to to know anything, process everything, and filter everything. But this is more on a biological level, I think.
Right. So this is,
On
yeah, talking about how we've kind of evolved to be able to see the world as we do.
to see the world in a grain of sand. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So Kant in Structures of the Mind um, is kind of like showing us those filters and frames, how we impose a structure of intelligibility on experience, which is the complete reversal of the Platonic model. Like you were just saying, like those forms being out in the world. No, actually, the forms are in our mind. We've made them up. Schemas is the word that keeps coming up for me. It's either Vygotsky or Piaget, the educational, further along psychologist that kind of used these schemas where we would organize things in schemas in our minds. And so that's what the word just keeps coming up for me.
Yeah. Next, I have my little imprisoned mind picture.
Yes.
That's what I have next, I think.
The mind is making sense of things. And yes, the mind isn't just withdrawn, it's in a prison.
Mm. It's extremely isolated from reality. It's from everything that is
Everything
real.
that gets to it has to go through a filter.
Yeah. It
And
can never know the thing in itself. I think it's Ding an sich. I think that's the German.
okay.
Ding an sich, the thing in itself.
Math is the grammar of our mind that creates meaning. The mind is isolated and trapped in itself. So then we have challengers to this idea. The first one being the romantic solution. Is that right?
Well, I think what's important to mention maybe before we get
Mm-hmm.
to that is like why is it so important this flip from the new Platonic to the Kantian way of seeing what is real and how do we get contact with what's real. So he draws that little thing of the filters, the levels of filters, and how the raw information comes in, the thing itself, the Ding an sich, and the structure we impose on it. So what's important there is like um, if we believe that the things that come in uh, is not experienced because he goes that up and down thing.
Yep,
Maybe I
yep.
should mention that first. So it's the world from the bottom up gives us senses, and rationally from the top down we make sense of it. And the Platonists put like the further up you go, the more real things become. And Kant says no, the deeper in you go, so the more irrational, the further away from rationality you go, the more real things become. And that is a really important. And if you know John's passion for rationality, you will and reason, you will understand why that is a flip that it causes him some discomfort. It's although he works a lot with the imaginal,
Yeah.
so
Right.
it's an and thing for him. I
Yeah.
imagine it's not a either or. So, but that is a very important switch. So the the further you withdraw inside of yourself for the romantics of the Kantians, the closer you are to reality. Uh, well, yeah. No.
Mm. Yeah.
I'm not sure that is absolutely correct, but
Well,
it's a top-down thing. That is correct.
yeah.
It's
Yeah. So the because we were talking in previous episode about words and letters and how
yes,
you always have that like cycle of like you understand the word because you know the letters, but you know which letters are being used because you know the word that's
yeah,
there.
yeah.
Um
The cat,
the
of
cat,
Taya
yeah.
cat.
Yeah. Ta yeah. Ta. Yeah. Um so yeah, the pursuing rationality versus pursuing irrationality to move
Yes.
towards reality.
Yeah, that is very well said. I don't know if
Yeah,
that's exactly his word, but it's
I
pursuing other.
summarized. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I think you summarized it very well. Pursuing other rationality or irrationality to move towards the real, and
Reality,
yeah, yeah,
which
to
is
reality.
so bonkers
Yeah.
to say, let's go through irrationality to find what's real, but there is a way. So,
I think that's also not necessarily should not be struck as any form of surprise, because I think that's
I
the way
know.
most people operate in our society. They prefer the irrational and think that's more uh, than
Yeah,
the
I see it.
rational.
I see, but then I see this exact same conflict of also those people that are so far into the logic that they don't even see
Yeah.
irrationality as being valuable at all.
But do remember that John is very explicit about not equating logic with rationality.
Okay. Yep.
It's rationality is much uh, richer than
Mm-hmm.
merely logic.
Mm-hmm.
It
Yeah.
includes it, but it's not exclusively that. It's like the emotions. That's what Descartes' Error, the book, is all about. The emotions are super important for making rational decisions.
Yep.
So, yeah, we tend to
That's why I
think
see it
then,
as a duality. The
yeah,
people that are really into the right now, not even understanding what is real in real life, things that we can be very clear about, where there are also people that are so far into logic and objective thinking
mm,
that there is no emotion, that it's
yeah,
almost now, yeah, cut off from
neither is
emotion.
rational.
Right,
Neither is
right.
rational.
Yeah. So then I have that equation.
Jung.
So
A place you pursue reality, you move deeper and deeper into reality. As you pursue rationality, you move deeper and deeper into reality. Yeah, that's pretty. Yeah, so Jung, my man Jung. So
Kant
there,
plus
oh,
Gnostic equals Jung. Would you have like a whole shelf of Jung?
there on top. But it's like,
Yeah.
well, I do not have Kant, unfortunately, but I do know Gnosticism, as you pointed out, and I fear like from now on I am not allowed to speak about Jung anymore, since I do not have not read Kant.
Oh. So with Kant plus Gnostic equals Jung, I wanted to probe you a little bit with this because you just went through that whole era of Gnosticism recently, and I'm sure maybe you've like delved into it before, but also like you're, and I will say, an expert on Jung. I know you would don't give me that look. No hesitation. But Kant is where it was like that's the variable. So how is Kant factoring? So we kind of formulated this cool depiction of what this kind of maybe looks like. Because let's just like talk. Let me just like open it up and see where you take us with that.
No, I love, like I said, I don't know Kant. And what was what when we were talking, what popped up for me is like John have said in the past and often that Jung is the Plato of the soul. So it's like, okay, he says he's Kantian, which is a complete opposite, turning around of Plato. So how happens? And then you came with this beautiful vision, like image, that I thought like, oh yeah, that's. I don't know if it's true, but it makes a lot of sense to me. So
Yeah. Okay. So we already know Plato leads us out of the cave. And so that was like the ascent. And then we were kind of like, okay, well, where does Jung take us? And it's deeper into the psyche or deeper into the self. And so then I had this image come to me of a trap door. Maybe that Kant removes, and we always say rug pull moments. So I was like, oh, he removed the rug from on top of the trap door for Jung. So then Jung knew to go deeper into it. So that's kind of the relationship that we're seeing,
Yeah.
which I think is
Oh,
cool.
that's beautiful. Yeah,
And
both
yeah,
of
so
them.
that's how you have Kant plus Gnostic equals Jung, because it's the both. You go
Yeah.
out and you go in.
Yes, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
I like that. I hope it's clear for other people the image that is in our minds. Like
Yeah.
both Plato and Jung encourages you to leave the cave where the everyday everything happens. I want to almost say where the cave of the shadows. Both Kant and both Jung and Plato encourages you to leave the cave of the shadows, but in different directions.
Mm-hmm.
Plato calls you upward towards the sun, and Jung calls you through the trapdoor, uh, deeper into the cave.
I like that.
So,
I
yeah,
like that because we've also had that cave diving analogy.
yeah.
And so this is the way to get to the cave diving, is to go deeper through the trap door. That's really great.
And
Okay.
I love it because I told you I may be misremembering, but I don't. If I'm misremembering, there's not a lot of details that I'm misremembering. Like Jung had a dream that kind of revealed to him the unconscious, and it happened when he was dreaming he was in a house, and then he discovered somehow a trap door that led down and down and down until he kind of found even remains of like the first humans in this house, which he didn't know these rooms existed, and that is how he was like inspired to discover like the unconscious. Like, although
Wow.
of course he knew Freud as well, and Freud also discovered the unconscious, but his way of seeing the unconscious.
Yeah.
So the
Yeah,
trapdoor is perfect.
that makes it really interesting that there's skeletons and stuff. Catacombs was another word that just came to me.
Mm,
And yeah, that whole the remnants of souls past. And it's like, okay, so what's in this? And so
mm,
you just like to dig through all of it.
mm,
Okay, so then like bringing it back to romantics, it says, therefore, Jung and Freud take that, and he's what is that? What the romantics do about how to reach out into the world, and makes it reaching down into the psyche in the case of Freud, but into the psyche and back out into the world in the case of Jung.
mm.
And that means that romanticism isn't about loving your partner in a particular way. It's the idea that we can recapture contact with reality by moving away from the rational layers of cognition and into the irrational layers.
Mm. Yes, and it's become romanticized because we think romantic love is supposed to be irrational. When I was watching this, I didn't mention it earlier. I was so like proud of myself. I'm like, okay, there's one thing that I suck at, and it's romantic love. But after this, I'm not so sure if it's a bad thing. It's
Right?
like,
Oh my gosh.
because he says like, you try to, someone has to. I wrote it somewhere, but I can't find it. Someone has to replace history, philosophy, religion, tradition,
Yep.
all those things, pressures you put on one person. I'm like, yeah, no. I read history, philosophy, tradition, participate in those things. So maybe that's why I suck at romantic love.
Yeah.
It's like, it's
Same.
I don't need that that. Yeah,
This is
it's
another vote for groups. But yeah, I
yeah,
wrote down the quote. He said, "You are trying to make this machinery of the imagination carry all of the Neoplatonic weight that religion, tradition, and philosophy and history carry on a romantic partner.
yeah,
They must take the role of all of that, but no one can carry all of that.
yeah,
That's everything we've lost."
yeah. And this, I want to say almost the sick thing about our community, our society is we feel condemned if we don't get the romantic thing right, because that is supposed to be the main thing in your life. That's supposed to be the thing that carries all meaning and purpose in your life.
Yep.
Especially as I don't know if the same is true for men, or maybe it's I don't
Right.
know. But and then we make to feel, we're made to feel guilty of failing in that one thing,
Yeah.
when actually putting all the weight on that one thing is a pretty huge failure of our society.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I was.
Yeah. Yeah. So you were saying like, especially for women, there
I don't
is,
know, because I'm not a man and I've never been a
yeah.
man, so I don't know how it is for a man.
Yeah. I mean, I've even talked to guys and I mean in a similar at a similar age to me and in a similar marital status to me, which is not married. Not even close.
No,
And no checkbox shingle. So what was mentioned to me was it is actually something that's brought up from family members and things like that. When are you gonna get married? And there's like this, where how are you gonna pass on your legacy if you're not in partnership? But I think like I don't know, like there is that interesting thing where it's almost like a woman is incomplete without a partner. Like at least a man gets that idea of like, oh, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna court a woman and I'm gonna provide and I'm gonna be the one going out. And that's just like the traditional model. And I'm not saying that that's not what it is anymore, whatever. I don't care. But there is like, I think people are afraid that I can't make it on my own. I think there's like a genuine concern that, well, if Sarah doesn't find a partner, is she going to be able to afford a home? Like, how is she going to make it in life, you know? And maybe that's like my own internal question too, because
but
how the
but
fuck do you make rent on a single income? You know,
but
these,
that is kind of rational,
yeah,
worries to have.
yeah, yeah,
And when my window fell out, like I also just fell apart, and I was like, I need a man. I need a man just to put my
yeah,
fucking window back in. Like, and so I think we need to, separate the practical sides of being in companionship
yeah,
or having a man with whom you can raise a family. Like that is, not necessarily bad. Like I don't think
right.
going back to that is, but and separating from it has to be romantic.
Yeah.
It has to be the story that like the whole universe conspire to bring the two of you together, and that's two very different stories.
Yes, yes, yes. Yes, the
The-
utility of a partnership
yeah.
versus this one's going to answer all of my dreams.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's like a guy to fix my window opposed to a guy to fix my life.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
that's
Exactly. Okay, good distinction. Yeah. Yeah. Um okay, well, kind of gave away the plot before we got to the meat and it says because I want to just like quote this part. Romantics are trying to get back to gnosis and participatory knowing.
Mhm.
In that Platonic tradition, the quintessential form of participatory perspectival knowing is love.
Mhm.
So that's how we get into this whole, the romantics are remembering that the faculty that stands between perception and reason is imagination. The
Mhm.
mind initially imposes order on the raw data of experience for it to be reflected upon. Kind of added that
Mhm.
last part, but
Yeah, I have
imagination is how the mind imposes structure. Yeah.
how the mind imposes structure on raw data so that it becomes available to reason. Yeah.
Therefore, music and art are understood as giving us access through imagination to what's real.
And we added before, and ritual. Ritual also has this purpose through
Yep.
the imaginal connect, giving us access to be able to reflect on what is real. Because, like we've said, well, when you're in the ritual, it's not necessarily going to be the time when you're reflecting.
No,
That's
no, no,
afterwards.
no. And
Yeah.
we tried that actually. It's funny. I mean, we were kind of like leaving the whole
Yeah.
ritual when you and I like had a experience that we tried to take apart in the moment and it got
Mm.
like it felt uncomfortable.
Weird.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
To try to process that in real time. So
Yeah.
there is that need for the reflection, like to
Yeah.
take it in its purest, the music, the poetry. Don't try to sit there and pick it apart in the moment.
Mm.
Digest it later, but really like savor the flavor as it
Mhm.
hits your tongue.
It's perfect, actually, analogy eating, because you're savoring the flavor while you're eating, and then your body goes about doing its business so that you can get the nutritions that you need to do afterwards, not while you're eating it. It needs to be digested first, and then all the little things sent through the blood to where it needs to be. So it's a whole process. Don't get to try to force yourself into rationality while you're appreciating these
Yeah.
things.
And that requires the ability to leave the rational, right? so so he breaks out between the difference of Locke and the Romantics here, where Locke had this understanding, and it's just kind of for contrast, he doesn't go too far into it. The mind is an empty canvas, and impresses, that's the word that he uses here, impressions and impresses.
Mm.
Where the Romantics, the world is an empty canvas. The world is an empty canvas, not the mind, but the world is an empty canvas on which imagination expresses itself.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. So either the world is like impressing on us, or we are expressing on the world. Like either or. These are the two statements. And then John is very like, yeah, no, they're wrong. They're both wrong. It's like,
Yes. He's presented both sides and both are wrong.
yeah. But it's because it's an either or thing. Like I think most things in life, if it's an either or situation, it's like, you're probably missing the mark there. It's probably an and situation.
Yeah. Yeah. So in this sense, he just like lays out that Romanticism is a pan-European movement that includes art, literature, music, poetry. It might even be the way that they're trying to understand religion, and it appears to attempt to do what religion used to do. But I wrote that he hesitates here when he says that it appears to attempt to do what religion used to do. Okay, because they're still integrating music, art, literature, and in a project of trying to find and make meaning in a scientific worldview to regain contact with reality. So using the machinery of religion is basically what he's saying. So maybe not attempting to do what religion did, but just using that same machinery.
I also think in his mind, religion is religio, ratio religio. So it's that right relationship, uh, being bound to reality type of thing is religion in his mind. So this, how to regain contact with reality. I think in his mind, that's the purpose of religion, like how to regain contact with reality. And that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to find ways that we can.
Yes, but then he says that Romanticism is the godfather of all pseudo-religious ideologies.
There's a lot of godfathers in this episode.
The Godfather. Yes, there are actually.
I think there's three, like, because it's this one, Schopenhauer and Nietzsche. So
Yeah,
it's like there's three Godfather movies as well, right? Wow.
yeah. Today, actually, well, for the transit, Saturn opposing the sun is a very Godfather dynamic. So, yeah,
Oh, Saturn opposing the sun. Yeah, I can.
yeah,
Knowing a little bit from you about the sun and knowing a little bit about Saturn,
yeah,
I can feel that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, looks like a massive transformation, altered states. We're using hypnosis in the case of Jung, I guess. Um,
Well, he tried hypnosis, but he wasn't very fond of it because Freud did hypnosis.
okay, okay.
Because he said like he wants people to remain a little bit of have some more agency, keep their agency, and that's why he came up with active imagination, because yeah, you have more agency in that than in hypnosis
Mm.
for you. So
Interesting you say that because the next two things I have written are drugs and experimental or experimentation. So like those were some things that he mentioned with altered states and attempting that transformation.
yeah.
So a lot of that is no agency with the hypnosis drugs and experimentation.
So what I'm thinking of with this loss of agency, it's with the things that he said they used. It's of course a loss of rationality as well. So that's like probably why they did it.
Yeah. We believe that love is an irrational force of combined destiny. So that's kind of what these the heavy price of pseudo-religious ideology of romanticism is, that belief became so ingrained in our culture. And he says we're still trapped where Luther and Descartes left us, inside the mind, not really in touch with things, and the only way to get in touch with reality is through irrationality.
Yeah. I wrote down, he calls romantic comedies not next to each other, but it comes down to really bad bullshit. Like, it's not just bullshit, it's really bad bullshit.
Yes. Really bad bullshit. And he even calls it the romantic spiritual junk food, tasty but not nutritious, which is great because we just went through that analogy of digestion.
Yeah. And you don't need as much digestion time with junk food, I think. And there's no really purpose for digesting it.
Basically, like a summary here, romantics know language is limited, therefore they're using poetry, which leads to the mystical experience. But without the spiritual exercises and sapiential traditions, psychotechnologies, regular reliable methods, and guides for these transformative experiences, all you have in the end are the words. So like we're just saying, that just passes right through you.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you can appreciate the poem, you aren't capable of getting much from it because everything is reduced to the words. Romantics don't give us practices, institutions, nor sets of psychotechnologies. They give us promises, images, and words.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, but I am a sucker for words.
Oh, I'm such a romantic. That's what I was going to say. My kink is romance. If I have one, that's it. Talk sweet to me, baby. All right, this sets fire. Rise of the French Revolution, the Napoleonic Wars. Even Beethoven is writing poetically or musically compositions for Napoleon. So why is it that these romantics would be so attracted to someone like Napoleon? That's the big question here. He says, look what Napoleon does by force of will, and that's what the imagination is. He presses a structure on the world, so they love him because he's doing that. His irrational idea of what the world should look like is being pressed onto the world, and they're like, go Napoleon, you get him. All right, well, Napoleon gets defeated and science moves on.
I even have a coaster of him. Like,
nice.
I'm like, oh, I should get my coaster.
You should, because he just said that Napoleon gets defeated. Well, here he is too. He persists just like science.
He's kind of handsome.
I
would have go Napoleon.
I would have gone Napoleon. All right. Okay. Yeah. What you got next? Where are you at in the notes?
Romanticism fails.
Yes.
We live with decadent romanticism.
And
then I have this dude.
This dude, I've seen his face so many times, and I'm so glad I finally have a name for him because I've always seen this haircut, and yeah, I know him, but I didn't know.
I don't know if you could call it a haircut.
Well,
like...
the situation up there. I've seen that before. It's not something you forget.
I loved reading Schopenhauer, and it's not easy read. This is one book. This is basically The World as Will and Representation. This is one of his books, which like it's too big, so they just make it too.
Wow.
So it's not an easy read, but I just loved reading him. So yeah, I don't know what that says about me, but
you're not easy.
Who would have thought?
Who would have thought? So what's yeah, let's just go ahead and go into it because he's the godfather of nihilism. So
and he's from Germany. Everything keeps happening into Germany. So then he
This is
also
very
goes into,
important that he mentions that, because yeah, we're going to start seeing some trends that we're not
yeah,
going to be very happy about, but
yes,
it's necessary to kind of understand how this mindset starts evolving, even though it's
yes,
not. And hey, we're already saying irrational, so
yeah,
don't shoot the messengers here. But yeah, there's some words that are going to be not so comfortable, and this isn't a comfortable part of the conversation, but Schopenhauer, the godfather of nihilism, internalizes the world of Occam and Luther. He picks up on Kant. And he's saying that this is happening in Germany because that's where history is unfolding during this particular time.
yeah. So you have the rational and the irrational. John has a little box, and the Kantians and the Romantics are all about this irrational side, the imaginal, the will, an expression of the will, and then Schopenhauer picks up this idea of the will, but it becomes to him that arbitrary God type of thing that Luther has, or that John claims Luther has, and it's an arbitrary will to live. It's which maybe that's why I see this, like something in us drives us. And I went through a phase where my God was life and this life force. And this feels like it, this will to live, this life force that is living through us. It's just like pushing us on. And yeah.
I
So
mean, I studied biology, which is the study of life. And for me, it was the genes, just like Dawkins. I mean, I was
yeah,
pretty like a follower of Dawkins. Like, yep,
yeah,
he's got it. He
yeah,
understands.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
um,
And John refers to him and says, yeah, well,
yep,
he doesn't have like a new idea. It's very old. So it
yep.
is here. So yeah.
Yeah. And interesting too, the mention of ego and will. He's like, the ego sits on the shoulders of the will. So I drew a little ego on top of the shoulders of the will. And that's really
Mm.
interesting because in astrology, you have your rising sign and your sun sign. The sun sign is the ideal to which you strive. The ego, your personality, how you go about doing that. So it's a similar kind of construction there too.
But will the sun then be the little ego, or will
The sun
your
would actually be the will.
okay,
Your
so
ego would be
what
the
drives
personality.
what drives me then is this Aries force,
Aries, fire.
but
Yep.
I present myself as this little Leo.
It's interesting because Leo is the second of the fire signs, and
uh,
so it's on the stage. It's
yeah,
presenting. It's the light emanating, not
mm,
the fire of going forth and initiating, because
yeah,
that's the cardinal sign of Aries. But Leo is I want to say it's fixed fire. It's
oh,
stayed. It's got stamina. Yeah, it's like a
okay.
roaring fire. So
Mm.
um So Schopenhauer in nihilism, I've got this quote: sex is the cruel joke that species plays on the individual.
Yes.
That is so biology in a nutshell. That is my entire degree right there, written in a sentence. Yes, when you produce offspring, you win the game of life in biology. That's it. You
Yeah,
just need to move your genes into the next generation, and then you won.
yeah.
So he says, what's the difference between you, who does it for 40 years, and a mayfly that does it for a day?
So the problem here is like you don't even have contact anymore with your rational side. That's what I wrote. Like, and it very correctly refers to Jung, the little ego on top of this big will, that's driven by the will. Yeah, yeah. That's my biggest. The thing that irritates me the most, especially then at work, is when I have something on my to-do list and someone tells me to do it or asks me even to do it. You can only, even if you just
I
ask,
know.
it's
Oh, I
like,
know.
I'm not gonna do it now. It's like top of my to-do list, but no.
No, exactly. That's hilarious. Oh,
Well, I
yep,
don't
that's
really do it because I have to
right.
do it. It's
So
my
I'm still
job.
gonna
But
do the
I
thing.
feel like I do want to.
The Leo still wants to shine as a star.
Oh my God, it makes so much sense now.
Doesn't it? Yeah, I like it when we can break it out like that. Okay. When you remove the pardon me, when you remove the connection between meaning making and rationality, you pay a devastating price. Existence is meaningless. Just like Dawkins says, we're all just replicator machines for our selfish
Mm.
genes. Well, he says that it's not like a direct quote, but yeah.
Mm.
Restlessly driven by irrational forces.
Mm.
And then you die. That's what I have
Yes.
written down.
I think I told you guys when we were in Austin that the moment I passed my desire to reproduce physically, and it happened quite spontaneous for me. It was just like past, I was 36, and then I just didn't want to have children anymore. And then shortly after that, I don't want to say suicidal, but it was
Right.
a lack of desire to live
Yeah.
just set in because of exactly this. I felt like
Yeah.
I have no purpose. Like the purpose of life is to reproduce, and I failed, so I have no right to exist anymore, type of thing.
Yeah.
And
Totally.
it was not a mental thing. It was my body felt it.
Body. Yes.
My body felt, okay, you can die now. Like
Yes.
you're useless. So I do feel this very strongly.
And that's the thing is
And
like it's not a conscious thought, but
no,
I know that feeling too. I've felt that recently because I mean
yeah,
like going on 3 years no relationship now, and I'm approaching an age where yeah, I won't be viable for that anymore. And what I've noticed now is I've taken a real deep interest in my niece and nephew
mm,
and providing for them. I'm like investing in their after school curricular activities. And so, and that's very biological. There's a very biological draw
yes,
to making sure that at least some of my gametes, maybe
mhm.
not mine directly, but like a quarter of them will make it.
I am almost 100% sure that everything we do as a carbon, like this project of me and Rebecca and this, is me, you know, like
Birthing.
second option. Yeah,
Yep.
second option. Like physically, I'm not gonna give birth to a child in this life. So like
Me and my
I have to
garden
give
too.
birth to something.
Yep.
Like
Yeah. Yeah. Isn't that so interesting? That's really good to
mm,
presence too, because I don't think it gets said a lot. Like, even if you're
mm,
not procreating and making a child, there is an urge from this genetic code
mm,
that says produce something,
yeah,
make something, and make it
yeah,
flourish in this world and
yeah,
allow it to be whatever it wants to be, but just make it and like produce it and allow it to
mm,
be there and love
yeah,
it unconditionally.
yeah.
Yeah,
I love that.
because the next question I have is, what is it all for?
But even that, like even if you produce spiritual somethings, what is it all for?
Yeah, yeah. There's an innate drive in us as
Yeah,
humans to see it through, that humans can function, and what you're
mm,
trying to produce is a guide. It's
mm,
fun, it's play. It's
mm,
like I want to produce something that can be interacted with and that humans
mm,
will, yeah,
mm, mm,
be in connection with. So there's something about humanity that's in it, that's embedded in it, and the
mm,
survival of our species, I
yeah,
guess. So that's the point that he's presented here. It's not necessarily everybody's point, but this is how Romanticism as a pseudo-religious ideology and nihilism as an existential response become inextricably linked together. This art and music and that idea of we can quiet that will, that those genes that are like, oh, I gotta reproduce, I need to fuck, whatever. We can quiet that will to live, and we can get respite in the art and the music. And it's interesting too, because you were saying just listen to the music, just observe the art, like,
mm,
and that's meditation. That's
mm,
allowing the clearing of the mind.
mm, yeah.
Ready to move into Nietzsche?
Yes, I think what keeps coming to mind, I think Freud said something. Oh, when I was a teenager, I summed Freud up because the guy that introduced me to philosophy, I had a huge crush on, um, also introduced me to Jung, but because he was a Freudian. So I read some on Freud because and Jung because of him, and then I summed Freud up. But I think it's a general summing up of him. Like basically, what he says is culture, uh, religion, relationships, everything that we consider valuable is distractions from the fact that we just want to fuck all the time. It's created from this urge to fuck, but then we
It's the
produce other
same.
things instead.
Yeah, I've
Um,
brought this up to plenty of people. The same, and it's not my idea, but the same energy that we use for
yeah,
sex is the energy that we use for our creativity. And
yeah,
yeah, I could see that such a easy reflection in my life because my life was committed to sex for a good portion of it with one partner. But still, it was like that was like the drill. Like every day it has to happen. There was
mm,
not a day that it didn't happen unless he wasn't there. So
mm,
then now, after that relationship and these 3 years, that holy cow, all of the things that I've created in the past 3 years, I've applied that energy to a completely different space and it's
yeah,
beautiful.
yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we do waste a lot of our creative energy in uh yeah, sex
And then without actually producing anything, because while
without
we use,
producing.
yeah,
Well,
because
we were talking a couple episodes about the whole pull out thing too. It's coming
exactly,
back. It's coming back. That's the thing, the no commitment.
yeah,
I can pull out. I can pull out.
yeah,
This feels good. Now I'm done. Now I
yeah,
can go about my day because that itch was scratched.
yeah. And I mean, I have a pull-out tendency as well. Like
Right?
everybody,
You're starting
everybody
to enjoy Gnosticism.
when people say like, "Oh my word, you committed yourself to John for 3 years. That's
Mhm.
amazing." And I'm like, no, no. From my mind, is after 3 years, I'm out. I
Right.
can pull out after 3 years. So this is not, I'm only committed for 3 years.
Yep.
So that's that's that pull out tendency, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
But now we're moving to the will to power.
Nietzsche.
Yeah.
Everybody's favorite. Everybody loves Nietzsche.
I do actually love Nietzsche, especially with this naked guy on the cover.
Yes, with his hair blowing in the wind. It's interesting to contrast that with the one that is on the Awakening title page or the cover,
Oh, yeah.
because it's like the guy looking into the abyss, but this one's the romantic version.
So good.
So
Yeah,
he's the
seeing that connection.
godfather of postmodernism. And he says also here, and you probably can tell me why this is important, also influenced by Wagner. Schopenhauer influences Nietzsche, but also Wagner.
Wagner was actually one of his friends for a while, but Nietzsche had a very problematic uh, personality. Like he was not very well equipped socially, so he idealized Wagner for a while and Schopenhauer as well. So he started both like, oh, I think the first time he read Schopenhauer, he like read it through in one go, and he was just amazed and mesmerized by this this man. And Wagner, he also had like, oh, he's just the best music, and he's exemplifying this will to power. And but then for some reason he just, I can't remember the reason, but he was like, no, Wagner's not the real deal after all. He's decadent himself, or
Mm.
falling into the trap of weak humanity or something like that. Like one of the things that Nietzsche is against, Wagner apparently showed, and he was immediately rejected for that. So yeah, but Wagner was this, for him in the beginning at least, this epitome of the romantic ideal of, yeah, putting your will on the world, pressing your will on the world, and making things like beautiful. And I want to say dramatic, because Wagner for me is a bit dramatic, but this force, he was this force imposing his will on the world, and that is, I think, what.
There's a connection back to Luther, and this is where we're going to get into that uncomfortable stuff.
Yeah.
So, what's going on with Germany and this anti-Semitism at this time? He
Okay.
says Gnosticism has a possible version of anti-Semitism. So not that Gnosticism is, but it has a possible version. Because we were talking earlier too about how Gnosticism isn't actually like a propositional, or it's not, a
Yeah,
religion. It's
like I said,
descriptive of,
yeah, a way of being religious. But
yes.
as I said, then I'm not sure that's true, because the Gnostics had a also their dogma. And one of the
Yeah.
dogma that he's probably referring to is that like you had this lesser God and then the more powerful gods on top. And the lesser God was the creator God, which is the God of the Jews. And hence anti-Semitism could possibly be from Gnosticism, because they
Mm,
had, amongst others, they had many mythologies, but amongst other they had this lesser God mythology, the creator God,
okay.
which was associated with Yahweh.
Mm,
Often, not always.
yeah, and they put up a quote. He doesn't actually say it. I wonder if he did because it looked like it was cut.
Yeah.
I imagine
He
he never wanted to
probably,
be quoted for that.
oh yeah.
So,
I just thought he couldn't find the exact words and he wanted to
ah,
say the exact
exact
words.
right. Yeah.
And so he was like, we'll just put that up. Because
Yeah.
it's a thing that if you, I mean, you're blaming a religious group that their founder is anti-Semitist, then you do want to get the exact words.
Yep. Yep. Right. To
So,
not, yeah. Mhm. Yeah. So he gives that, or they give that Luther quote, which I mean, it's graphic and horrible. And it says treatise argues for burning their books, synagogues, homes, drafting them into forced labor and exiling them. And so that's like,
mm.
I mean, we know that. Uh, we know that story.
Mm.
So,
Be
and
careful
then,
what you say because it might come true.
yep. So this part he says, trying to like describe what's, I don't know, the manner of thinking here. So the Jewish people are followers of the law. He says that in the beginning. The law, I guess, is that creator God's law,
Hmm.
the Moses tablets.
Hmm.
And so people are followers of the law, are trying to earn salvation, because then we were talking about how the Reformation people are trying to earn the salvation, I guess, through
Well,
acquiring money. Or no, am I missing here?
they couldn't earn salvation because salvation was just a free gift, sola gratia. It was a gift from God. But in the Reformation, at least that's what the book claims, and that's what John claims. Um, they try to prove that they were saved by living like, because if you're saved, if you're chosen, and this is very Old Testament or Jewish,
Yep.
depending on how you want to see it. If you're saved, if you're chosen by God, you will be blessed. So let's be prosperous and be blessed, and then that's proof of the fact that we are chosen, that we are the elect. So they couldn't earn it, but I mean, we have this thing in us, humanity, I think, that we need to deserve things. So then they said, oh, we can't deserve it, but wait, we can, we can act as if, we are chosen, and then that will bring a lot of rewards. So, yeah.
Yeah. Here, because there is a rejection of Jesus, that idea of salvation, there is a rejection of faith and salvation in terms of the law.
They choose to follow the law instead of Christ,
Yes.
or instead of Jesus,
Ah,
because they don't, and this we have to call him Jesus and
yep.
not the Christ, because they actually were waiting for the Messiah / the
Yes.
Christ. So we
Right.
can't call him in this context the Christ. They choose to follow the law instead of following Jesus, and that
Uh-huh.
was
Uh-huh.
like, what, you bad people, like,
Right.
yeah.
And so Nietzsche rejects Kant, Plato, Socrates. He says, Socrates is so close to me that I'm always fighting.
Yeah.
Um, so what do you got there?
Yeah, he says something like, John quotes this so much lately. I hate Socrates. He's so close to me that I'm constantly fighting him. So Nietzsche has a deep conflict with the actual revolution. He says he wants to savor this self-transcendence as well, which is a project that John is also like, how do we savor the self-transcendence of the actual revolution? But of course, he's dead set against the two worlds, like the religious way of being, the slave morality. So yeah, instead of the slave morality, he proposes this world, this deep will. The driving is the will to power. So not to submit to any, which is actually quite Gnostic now that I say it, not to submit to any like authority, godly authority, but to assert yourself, to become the Übermensch. There's like the poor Germans who lived in the time of Hitler. They were set up for that for centuries. It's like the story was already written. The full stop just had to be put at the end. That's basic. So when he uses he refers to Spinoza. I can't remember him talking of Spinoza, but he says he will come to Spinoza and conatus, which is the Latin for this will, this will to
The
not will
power.
to power.
Yeah, everything has the will to power, like you said. Everything is pressing itself out, a feature of reality, not just a feature of our mind. And then, so I have here Schopenhauer, in touch with will to live, our driving force is meaningless. And Nietzsche is like, stop being so Christian, extend, create, and master yourself in the world. So like you're saying, like not being subordinate to, but also like actually asserting that will that's existing there, the will to power. So Nietzsche sees a way to get self-transcendence, to create beyond the self. To him, Christianity is suppressing the capacity for self-transcendence, because he's blocked by his Lutheran, his father's interpretation of Christianity.
Which is that self-negation that we talked about, emptying yourself so that you can be a vessel for God, which he has from the Rhineland mystics.
So the last thing that I have is a critique of Nietzsche, where
I just also want to throw in, like I think, and maybe John didn't mean Jordan Peterson, but there was a definite stab at Jordan Peterson here. Although he maybe did not mean Jordan Peterson, but the description fits him so well. Like people who are really kind of even obsessed, but John uses the word obsessed, really fond of Nietzsche. Jordan Peterson is really fond of Nietzsche. And yet really against postmodernism. Like that, those two don't. Yeah, exactly. I was like, oh, hello.
Yeah, so that one's, that definitely is
That's
apparent.
not obvious at all.
Yeah.
But I imagine there's a lot of people like that. But yeah, he just jumped out to me and at me.
He's kind of leading the revolution on that, we could say.
Yeah.
Or at least one of the figureheads of that, of yes, quoting Nietzsche all the time, but totally anti-postmodern ideologies. Yeah.
And not only postmodern ideologies, but also postmodern philosophy. It's yeah.
So the critique of Nietzsche is is it really? Many perspectives. I was just talking earlier about how I filter through everybody else. I guess I forgot this part. So many perspectives, the role of myth, symbols. He understands how self-deceptive we are, but he can't do anything about it. There's a problem, self-transcendence without the machinery of dealing with self-deception.
Yes, that's beautiful. So yeah, Nietzsche has so many voices. And I think John is kind of implying that he has this many voices in order so that he can kind of correct himself. Like, I think this, but wait, I also think this, because maybe that's, as an attempt to be less self-deceptive. But in John's mind, the only way to be less self-deceptive is through rationality. And Nietzsche, being a child of Kant and the Romantics, and this emphasis, and Schopenhauer, this emphasis on the irrational, and this letting go of Platonism, because he was very anti-Platonism, letting go of this ascending through rationality, just robs himself from this very viable way of overcoming self-deception, which is rationality.
Yes. So maybe more next time on how to be rational about your self-transcendence.
Well, It's funny that you should say that, because I recently heard John recap the Waking from the Meaning Crisis, and the way he recaps it, he also put it in two boxes. The first half is the history of the meaning crisis, like how we got where we are, and the second half is the cognitive science about the meaning crisis, explaining how we, what's going on in our minds and when this happens. And a big part of that is about rationality. So yes, we will most definitely get to rationality. Yeah,
but we still have a little bit of history to go through.
We have 2 more episodes of history, and then I think 26 is actually just called cognitive science, and then from dense. There it gets dense. And at the end, when he talks about the prophets of the meaning crisis, it gets kind of chill, or maybe for me, because I know, the prophets of the meaning crisis, Jung, what's the oh man, Paul Tillich.
Oh, you almost forgot. You did it.
I did. It was just
Mercury
like
retrograde. Mercury.
I just wanted to say that. But I forgot his name, Mercury's name. Yeah, so.
Okay, well, that was the Romantics. That was a brief summary of Kant, a little bit of Nietzsche. Oh.
I forgot to mention this book.
We did forget to mention this one.
This is the book he recommends in this episode. And if I'm gonna, if we have time and you want me to read, I'm gonna.
Yeah. Take us out.
So I'm gonna take us out with.
Well, be gentle.
I can't. I'm sorry.
I can't. Is that okay?
I'm gonna take us out with how this Gary Lachman takes out his book, so the last paragraph of this book. It is at such times that something like Barfield's responsibility of the imagination is especially needed. Oh, that's so cool. I didn't plan for this, but it really links to it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It is such times that something like Barfield's responsibility of the imagination is especially needed. This requires a calm, detached, but engaged awareness, the kind of passive potency Swedenborg spoke of, an alert, self-possessed attention to detail and readiness to receive, with both ways of knowing available for work. He doesn't refer to John's ways of knowing. He refers to knowing via poetry or the imaginal, and knowing via science, or the scientific way of knowing. So he says we need both ways, needs to be available for us. It is in such a state of wakefulness and purpose that what we may have learned of the lost knowledge of the imagination can be of use to ourselves and to the world. To paraphrase Blake, in the future, the world's face as it unfolds it will depend on the minds that behold it.
Yes, wonderful. Well, it's nice to be held. It's nice to behold. And yes, we will be back to talk about Hegel. We'll be back for episode 24, and we hope that you'll join us there.